In the heart of a seemingly perfect neighborhood, where front lawns are trimmed, mailboxes wear smiles, and porch lights flicker like warm invitations, something unimaginable was brewing. Hidden behind a white picket fence and a blue-painted door was a story darker than fiction dares to go. Here, where neighbors exchanged cookies over the fence and kids played tag until the sun dipped behind the trees, lived the Wexley siblings, Darren and Ava. To anyone looking in, they were close, almost too close, the kind of bond only forged in fire or trauma. Ava was 17, smart, radiant, the kind of girl teachers remembered long after the year ended. Her laughter had a musical quality to it. It could turn a stormy room into sunshine. She was kind, quiet, artistic, and private. Darren, 2 years older, was her shadow. Always nearby, always watching. Protective? Maybe. Possessive? Maybe more. Together they were known as the Wexleys, a pair so tightly knit it felt like they had their own language. Inside jokes, glances that said more than words, and a shared silence that spoke volumes. But behind those bedroom walls something else lived, something unspoken, a terrible weight that tied them together in a secret pact. It started subtly. Strange behaviors that seemed harmless at first. Ava stopped inviting friends over. Darren dropped out of college with no explanation. The blinds in their house were always drawn. No laughter from the windows, no music, just silence. The kind of silence that swallows a home. Neighbors noticed but said nothing. After all, it's easier to look away than look deeper. And besides, no one wanted to believe anything was wrong with the Wexleys. Not in this neighborhood, not here. But there was one person who couldn't shake the feeling. Mrs. Rosen, an elderly widow who lived across the street. She had a clear view of the Wexley home from her kitchen. Every night, she said, the upstairs lights would flicker exactly twice before going out. Every single night. Like a ritual, like a signal. She once asked Ava, during a rare morning walk, why she always wore long sleeves in the heat of July. Ava just smiled and said, softly, "Cold runs deep in our house." Then she kept walking. That was the last time Mrs. Rosen saw her alive. 2 weeks later, on an otherwise uneventful Monday morning, Ava didn't show up for school. At first, people assumed she was sick. Then came the second day. Then the third. That's when the whispers started. By Friday, the town's version of calm had cracked. Whispers became rumors, and one call changed everything. The voice was Darren's. Police arrived within minutes. The Wexley home was eerily still. No signs of forced entry. No blood on the walls, no struggle. Just a quiet house holding its breath. And one room with the door closed. Inside, they found Ava, pale, motionless, her body curled like a question mark on her bedroom floor. And beside her, Darren, hands trembling, eyes vacant, whispering something over and over. Whispering, she knew. She was going to tell. What did she know? What was she going to tell? And what horrible secret had to be buried, even if it meant killing the only person Darren ever loved? This wasn't just another tragedy in suburbia. This was a calculated silence, a murder not out of rage but out of desperation. Because the closer investigators looked, the more disturbing the truth became. And the worst part? This was just the beginning. But there was one person who couldn't shake the feeling. Mrs. Rosen, an elderly widow who lived across the street. She had a clear view of the Wexley home from her kitchen. Every night, she said, the upstairs lights would flicker exactly twice before going out. Every single night. Like a ritual. Like a signal. She once asked Ava during a rare morning walk why she always wore long sleeves in the heat of July. Ava just smiled and said, softly, "Cold runs deep in our house." Then she kept walking. That was the last time Mrs. Rosen saw her alive. 2 weeks later, on an otherwise uneventful Monday morning, Ava didn't show up for school. At first, people assumed she was sick. Then came the second day, then the third. That's when the whispers started. By Friday, the town's version of calm had cracked. Whispers became rumors. And one call changed everything. It started like any other Monday. Coffee pots hissed. School buses screeched to a halt. The world outside moved forward in sync, unaware that in one quiet house, time had stopped. At 7:43 a.m., Lincoln Heights High School marked Ava Wexley absent for the third day in a row. By noon, the school had called home. No answer. By 3 p.m., Ava's closest friend, Melody Carmichael, walked to her house after class, stood at the gate, and knocked. No answer. By 4:10 p.m., Darren made the call. 911 operator. Professional, 911, what's your emergency? Darren, hollowly, I think my sister's dead. I didn't do anything. She's cold. Tay. Dispatch records show that his voice was eerily calm. Too calm. Trained responders know the difference between shock and detachment. And Darren, he sounded empty. Within minutes, officers from the county sheriff's department arrived at 2415 Melrose Street. What they found was a house, undisturbed. No forced entry, no smashed furniture, no blood spatter, just stillness. A half-eaten bowl of cereal on the kitchen counter. A phone vibrating endlessly on silent. A family photo tilted on the hallway wall. And upstairs, Ava's room. Her bedroom door was closed, not locked, closed. Inside, it was like stepping into a memory that had frozen in place. A lavender-scented candle still smoked. Her art journal lay open, a sketch of a young girl with no face. Her phone sat on the desk, screen cracked, unread messages piling up like desperate voices calling from the outside. Ava's body was found on the floor beside her bed. She was pale, limp, cold, no signs of struggle, no visible injuries, just a single trickle of dried blood under her nose, and her eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling like they had one last question they never got to ask. Darren was sitting in the hallway outside, legs folded, rocking back and forth. His hands were wrapped in a blanket. He wasn't crying. He wasn't yelling. He was whispering, coldly whispering. She was going to ruin everything. Muttering, she was going to ruin it all. So why did Darren wait until Monday to call? He claimed he just found her, that he thought she was sleeping for a long time. But the details didn't line up. Neighbors reported seeing the upstairs bedroom light flicker twice every night, including the night she supposedly died. The responding officer, Detective Margot Ellis, had seen many scenes in her 18-year career, but this one left her unsettled.
He kept saying she was going to tell someone. We asked him what. He just shook his head like a child who broke a toy. That kind of denial, that level of quiet panic, it only happens when someone's hiding something they believe is unforgivable.
Paramedics confirmed that Ava had been dead for approximately 36 hours. Not that morning, not the day before, but Saturday night. So why did Darren wait until Monday to call?
He claimed he just found her, that he thought she was sleeping for a long time, but the details didn't line up. Neighbors reported seeing the upstairs bedroom light flicker twice every night, including the night she supposedly died. Mrs. Rosen, the same neighbor who had warned that something didn't feel right, told police she heard muffled arguing that Saturday night. A girl's voice, a door slam, then silence. It wasn't long before suspicion turned to Darren, and it wasn't long after that before detectives made a quiet discovery.
In the trash can by Ava's desk was a tissue stained with blood. In her journal, tucked into the back pages, barely visible, was a sentence scribbled again and again in frantic, jagged lines. I need to tell someone before he hurts me. I need to tell someone before he hurts me. What did she need to tell? Who was he? And why had she waited this long to write it? Investigators ordered a full forensic examination of Ava's body. Toxicology, blood work, skin under fingernails. But the most alarming clue didn't come from the autopsy. It came from Darren's internet history. In the days leading up to Ava's death, Darren had searched. How long does it take to overdose without leaving a mark? Can you be arrested for what happens in your own house? Siblings sharing trauma. Can police separate them? At this point, the question wasn't if he did it. It was why. And what exactly were they hiding that was so shameful, so dangerous, that Darren believed his only way out was to silence the one person who shared it with him?
When we asked him if he heard Ava, he said something I'll never forget. He said, I didn't mean to kill her. I just needed her to stop talking.
The story that had stunned the town was no longer a case of sudden death. It was now a calculated cover-up. A story of siblings bound by something so disturbing, so monstrous, that it turned a brother into a murderer. And the secret? It was coming to light. But before the investigators could reach it, they'd have to peel back the layers of a childhood riddled with shadows, a past that neither Ava nor Darren had ever spoken about. A pact made in whispers and broken in blood. The silence was finally shattered, and what lay beneath the surface would disturb even the most hardened detectives. So why did Darren wait until Monday to call? Before the screaming, before the silence, there was a secret that had festered between two siblings, not in the open, but in the shadows. A secret so unbearable that Ava Wexley felt her only escape was to speak, and Darren believed his only solution was to stop her. As police peeled back layers of the Wexley siblings' history, what emerged was a chilling psychological portrait, not of two young people merely caught in a tragedy, but of two lives twisted by trauma, shaped by silence, and ultimately destroyed by a pact they never should have made. It started 5 years earlier. Ava was just 12 when she stopped attending birthday parties. She avoided school trips. Her grades dropped, and she became distant, especially from her mother. Darren, then 14, had already begun withdrawing, skipping school, isolating in his room, lashing out when pushed. To outsiders, it was just a rough patch, a troubled phase. To Ava and Darren, it was the beginning of the nightmare. Detectives uncovered old school reports that hinted at something more. Bruises dismissed as accidents, guidance counselors noting changes in behavior, friends who recalled Ava suddenly going silent mid-sentence whenever her father's name came up. Then came the bombshell. Wexley had been investigated for suspected child abuse, but the case had quietly closed due to lack of cooperation from family members. No charges, no follow-up, just silence, just fear. And that's where the terrible secret began. The one Ava carried like a phantom, and Darren buried like a corpse in his mind. Multiple sources, including old text messages, hidden diary entries, and testimony from Ava's friend Melody, revealed that the Wexley siblings had been victims of prolonged abuse at the hands of their father. Emotional, physical, and, in Ava's case, possibly sexual. But here's where it turns darker. Darren, the older sibling, was forced to participate. Court documents later revealed that Richard Wexley would pit his children against one another in twisted power games. He used threats, manipulation, and something far worse: shame. Darren, still a child himself, was used as a tool of control, ordered to obey or be punished. Years later, even after Richard died in a car accident, the trauma remained. The chains weren't physical anymore, they were emotional, and they bound Darren and Ava together in a shared prison of memory. They never told anyone, not their mother, not their teachers, not the authorities. They only told each other, and in that bond, a dangerous dynamic formed. Darren believed he had protected her, while Ava believed he had helped hurt her. Ava's later journal entries, now carefully preserved in evidence, she began to express her internal war. He was just a kid too, but why didn't he stop it? Why didn't he scream? Why did he listen to him? I'm scared of how much I still love him. Those words painted the tragic paradox. Darren was both her protector and her pain. In his police interviews, Darren admitted that Ava had recently started talking about therapy, about finally telling someone, going public, ending the lie. She even hinted at reaching out to a podcast that shared survivor stories. To Ava, it was liberation. To Darren, it was destruction. She said she wanted the world to know that we couldn't pretend forever, that we had to burn it all down and rebuild. But I didn't want to be the villain. Darren confessed that the night Ava died, they had fought, not about the past, but about the future. Ava had written a letter to their mother and left it on her desk, ready to be discovered. Darren found it first. The letter was simple, heartbreaking. "Mom, there are things you don't know, things Dad did, things Darren saw, things Darren did. But we were children. We didn't choose it. We just survived it." Survival. That's all they had ever done. But the moment Ava chose to live beyond survival, to speak her truth, Darren panicked. That night, Darren crushed a handful of sleeping pills and stirred them into Ava's tea. According to toxicology, the dosage wasn't lethal, but mixed with her existing anxiety medication, it was enough to slow her heart, enough to put her into a sleep she wouldn't wake from. He didn't mean to kill her, he claimed. He just wanted time, time to destroy the letter, time to convince her not to speak, time to undo the truth before it escaped into the world. But time, as always, ran out. Cut to a dark montage, police bagging the letter, Ava's sketchbook, the tea mug with residue, and Darren's empty gaze in court. Psychologists later determined that Darren suffered from disassociation, a state where trauma survivors mentally distance themselves from painful memories. In Darren's case, that disassociation may have become delusion. He couldn't accept being seen as an abuser. He couldn't face a life where the only person who understood him now saw him as part of the pain. So he silenced her to protect a lie, to protect himself. Voiceover grows quiet. He didn't tie her hands, he didn't raise a weapon, he didn't scream. He just made sure she never spoke again. In the courtroom, when the letter was read aloud, gasps echoed like thunder. Ava's words, calm, careful, confessional, made jurors weep. And Darren? He didn't flinch. He stared straight ahead, almost proud, almost free. This wasn't just about a murder. This was a war between memory and survival, between truth and shame, between two people who loved each other in the aftermath of horror, and whose love became the very thing that destroyed them. Because when you bury pain for too long, when you keep secrets in the shadows, they don't die. They rot. And sometimes they kill. There's something unnerving about a boy who doesn't cry when his sister dies, not from stoicism, not from strength, but from something colder, a disconnection from the weight of what he's done. By the time Darren Wexley was taken into custody, the media had already devoured the story. Brother breaks silence on sister's death. Siblings bound by a family's hidden darkness. But inside the sterile walls of a police interview room, far from the noise, Darren wasn't offering headlines. He was offering nothing. At first, he denied everything. Defensive. He found her that way, he said, suggesting she must have overdosed. Ava had struggled with anxiety, hadn't she? Questioning. Maybe she took too much of her medication. Maybe she wanted to die. But that story didn't last, because Ava hadn't just died. She had been silenced in a calculated, deliberate way. The crushed sleeping pills, the anxiety meds, the deleted searches, the missing confession letter, which officers found stuffed into the back of a cereal box in the kitchen, sloppy, desperate, a last-minute attempt to bury the truth. Faced with mounting evidence, Darren's facade began to crack, not in anger or panic, but in a slow unfolding dissociation, like the weight of reality was something he had to remember in pieces. Thoughtful. We didn't push him, we didn't yell, we just asked him to tell us the truth, and eventually he did. Piece by piece, like he wasn't confessing to a murder, but explaining a decision. What he revealed wasn't a confession in the traditional sense, it was a justification. He admitted to arguing with Ava the night she died. He admitted she was going to tell someone about what their father had done and what he had been forced to do. She wanted to expose it. He wanted to keep it buried. And in his mind, one of them had to lose. But the line between protector and abuser had already blurred. The prosecution argued that Darren made a conscious decision to prevent Ava from speaking out, that he knowingly tampered with her tea, that he watched her drift off to sleep, knowing she might not wake up. And when she didn't, he waited. For 2 days, before calling the police. 2 days of silence, while Ava's body cooled just feet away. They painted a picture not just of guilt, but of premeditation. The defense argued that Darren was a victim too, a deeply traumatized young man trapped in a cycle of shame, fear, and survival instincts. They didn't deny what he did. They just begged the jury to understand why. The trial lasted 6 weeks. Testimonies from teachers, neighbors, counselors, and psychologists created a chilling mosaic of the Wexley family, where smiles masked secrets, and trauma was inherited like old furniture. Ava's friend Melody took the stand, her voice shaking as she read from Ava's final messages. Shaking voice. He's not evil. He's broken. But broken people can still hurt you. It was the sentence that cracked the courtroom in two. For days, the jury deliberated, not just on the crime, but on the context. Was Darren a calculating murderer? Or was he a shattered boy who made a horrific choice? In the end, the verdict was read on a gray afternoon. Rain tapped the courthouse windows as reporters huddled outside, pens poised. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of manslaughter in the first degree. Not murder, manslaughter. The judge called it a tragedy of silence, a case where society's failure to intervene early had left two children to navigate darkness alone. One didn't make it out. The other would live the rest of his life with the echoes. Darren was sentenced to 18 years in prison, with eligibility for parole after 12. There was no applause, no cries of injustice, just silence. The same kind that had defined their house. The same that had choked Ava's voice for years. The same that Darren thought would protect them, but had buried them both. The court gave Darren time, but time was never the answer. Time didn't stop what happened to them. Time didn't stop Ava's pain. And time won't undo what he did. The consequences extended far beyond the prison walls. The community of Lincoln Heights would never be the same. The Wexley family home was sold within months. A new family moved in, unaware perhaps of what once lived behind those walls. A small mural appeared on the side of Ava's former school, painted by her classmates. A sun rising from behind a cloud. Beneath it, in Ava's handwriting, was a quote taken from her sketchbook. "I don't want revenge. I want peace, even if it costs me everything." Her mother didn't attend the mural ceremony. She hasn't spoken publicly since the trial. Some say she moved out of state. Others claim she visits Ava's grave every Friday at sunset. As for Darren, he now resides in a medium-security prison 2 counties away. In his latest psychological evaluation, he expressed remorse, but not in the way most would expect. "I'm sorry she's gone, but I don't think anyone will ever understand why I did what I did. Not even me." This wasn't a story of justice. It wasn't even a story of guilt. It was a story of 2 lives tethered by trauma, unraveling in a world that looked the other way. And when one finally spoke, the other made sure no one would ever hear her again. Ava Wexley didn't just carry trauma. She carried proof. For months before her death, Ava had been collecting fragments of truth-torn diary pages, sketchbook entries, unsent letters, and even covert voice recordings made on her phone. She wasn't just preparing to speak. She was preparing to document. What Ava wanted to expose wasn't just that her father, Richard Wexley, had abused her. She wanted to tell the world what he had done to both of them, her and Darren. But the most horrifying truth was that Darren wasn't just a witness. He had been forced to participate. Ava's final journal entry revealed that during the worst of the abuse, their father had manipulated Darren into becoming an extension of his cruelty. Through threats, coercion, and psychological torture, he broke down Darren, weaponized him, turning brother against sister. In Ava's own words, he made Darren the monster, not because he wanted to be one, but because he was scared not to obey. I knew that, but it still hurts. The acts were unspeakable, emotional torment, physical humiliation, and, Ava hinted, instances of forced intimacy, acts no sibling should ever endure, let alone be pushed into. I was 13. Darren was 15. Our father was the devil, but the world would never believe it unless I showed them. I forgave Darren 100 times in my heart, but I needed the world to know the full truth, not the pretty version. Ava didn't just plan to go to therapy. She had begun drafting an anonymous blog. She recorded voice notes describing the rooms, the patterns of their father's abuse, and the chilling ways silence had been enforced in the house. She even reached out, secretly, to a podcast focused on childhood trauma, leaving only this message in their inbox. "I want to tell my story, but I'm afraid it might destroy the only person who survived it with me." That person was Darren. And when he discovered what Ava was preparing to do, the recordings, the letters, the sketches, something in him snapped. Not out of hatred, but out of fear. If Ava spoke, Darren wouldn't just be exposed, he'd be transformed. In the eyes of the world, into a monster. Not a victim, not a survivor, but a criminal born of a criminal. So he chose silence. And Ava paid for it with her life. She died not because she remembered, but because she refused to forget. And what she wanted to expose was the most terrifying truth of all. That sometimes the people we love the most are the ones who hurt us because they were hurt first. And when no one listens, that cycle becomes deadly. Sometimes the scariest horror stories aren't found in the woods or down a dark alley. They're found in homes that look just like ours. It's been nearly 2 years since Ava Wexley's last breath filled the still air of her lavender-painted room. Since the moment Darren chose silence over salvation. And yet the ripples of what happened in that quiet house on Melrose Street have never truly stopped. After the trial, Lincoln Heights changed not visibly, not dramatically, but in its eyes. Neighbors stopped waving as much. Doors stayed closed a little longer. Children walked home in pairs. A place that once felt insulated by comfort now felt exposed, vulnerable to the idea that evil doesn't always wear a stranger's face. Especially when that evil is complicated, when it's born not out of hatred, but out of fear. The house stayed empty for months. Real estate agents came and went. Some locals whispered that no family would ever feel safe inside it again. Others didn't even speak the Wexley name anymore, like doing so would summon ghosts they didn't want to confront. But the truth is, ghosts don't care if you say their names. They live in the silence. And that silence still haunts those who knew Ava. Melody Carmichael, her best friend, now attends university 2 states away. But she carries Ava with her in everything, in her artwork, in her voice, in the way she volunteers at a local shelter for abuse survivors. Sometimes I wonder if she knew that I would carry this for her, that she left pieces of herself in all of us. Maybe that's what memory is. Not pain, not grief, just echoes. Those echoes extend far beyond melody. At Lincoln Heights High, Ava's story has become more than a cautionary tale. It sparked a movement. Students petitioned for mandatory trauma awareness training. Teachers now undergo annual workshops on recognizing behavioral red flags. A peer support group was formed and named in Ava's honor, Voices Unbroken. They meet every Wednesday in the art room, the same place Ava once stayed after class, sketching quietly, alone. Now those same walls carry color, hand-painted by students. Butterflies, torn open journals, candles, and beneath them a single quote. Speak, even if your voice shakes. But perhaps the most haunting legacy of all belongs to Darren. He now lives behind concrete walls and steel doors. Prison has not been kind, not in the way you'd think. There were no attacks, no dramatic altercations, no riots. Just silence. Same kind he once lived in. The same kind he killed to preserve. According to staff psychologists, Darren spends most of his time in the library. He reads psychology books, memoirs from survivors, poetry. He rarely speaks. He hasn't requested a single visitor, not even his mother. He's polite, quiet, always alone, like he's trying to make peace with something inside his own mind. Or maybe he's just waiting for the world to forget. But the world hasn't forgotten, because stories like Darren and Ava's don't just end. They stay. In the halls of high schools, in the whispers between neighbors, in every child too afraid to speak. They are reminders that abuse doesn't always leave bruises, that trauma can look like silence, like long sleeves in July, like a smile that never quite reaches the eyes, like two siblings so close, you wonder if they're protecting each other or hiding something darker. This is not a story with a satisfying ending. Ava is gone. Darren is broken. Justice was served, maybe. But peace is harder to find. What we're left with is the question that always lingers after the headlines fade. How could this have been prevented? The truth is brutal in its simplicity. Someone could have asked more questions, listened more closely, believed Ava when her eyes said more than her words. Noticed the pattern in her drawings. Noticed how Darren flinched when his name was spoken in certain tones. But no one did, and so they were left to face monsters alone. Ava tried to fight back with ink, with honesty, with truth. Darren tried to bury it, and in doing so, he buried her too. Still, Ava's voice has become louder in death than it ever was in life. Her story is now part of classroom discussions, therapist case studies, true crime conversations, survivor groups, and documentaries like this one. She has become more than a victim. She has become a signal. That silence kills, that trauma festers, and that sometimes the greatest crimes happen not with a scream, but with a whisper. I hope someday someone hears me. We hear you now, Ava, and we won't stop listening.